I hadn't planned on spending the summer in a stranger's barn, let alone with him watching me like I might bolt if he blinked too long. But life, especially mine, rarely sticks to the plan. It started with the storm. Not metaphorical, though that came too later. Just a real, honest downpour that drowned my road trip halfway through eastern Pennsylvania and forced me off a washed-out back road and onto a narrow gravel path. I was supposed to be heading to a cabin upstate, something rustic and charming according to the rental site. Of course, charming didn't stop the bridge leading to it from collapsing. I parked on the shoulder and jogged toward the only lit structure in sight, a large red barn, its silhouette glowing under the flickering outdoor floodlight. I don't know what I expected. Definitely not him. Gil. Tall, broad-shouldered, and in boots caked with mud. His plaid shirt was rolled to his elbows, and a hay strand hung lazily from his mouth like he'd stepped out of a movie and into real life. I recognized him immediately. You don't forget someone you shared an entire college orientation week with, especially not when they laughed like the sun had nothing better to do than orbit them. We hadn't spoken since that week 3 years ago. And yet there he was, standing like he'd been waiting for me the whole time. "Looks like you're soaked," he said, voice even rougher than I remembered. "You can stay in the barn if you don't mind the company." I didn't ask who he meant by company. I just followed him in, heart pounding harder with every step, not because of the cold or the rain, but because something else had snapped loose the moment I saw him. I'd always told myself it was a silly crush. College was weird like that. Too many late nights, not enough sleep, and too much wine with strangers who became fast friends and faded just as quickly. But now, standing there with rain dripping from my hair and Caleb tossing me a dry flannel shirt, I realized something uncomfortable. The crush never faded. It had just gone quiet, buried deep under the noise of life. Now, forced together again by chance and weather, it was waking up. And I wasn't sure what to do about it. Caleb didn't ask why I was out in the middle of nowhere, soaked and uninvited. He just handed me a towel, pointed to an old space heater in the corner of the barn, and said, "You still hate coffee, right?" That caught me off guard. "You remember that?" I asked, pulling the flannel tighter around myself. It smelled like cedar and something warmer, something I didn't want to name yet. Caleb shrugged like it wasn't a big deal. "You ordered hot chocolate every morning that week. Said coffee tasted like regret and cardboard." I laughed. "Still does." We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the kind that only happens when two people have shared some piece of their lives, no matter how small or distant. Orientation week had been a blur of name tags, awkward icebreakers, and campus maps, but I remembered Caleb. Not just because of his laugh or his ridiculous impressions of every professor we met, but because he saw me when I was trying so hard not to be seen. He asked real questions. Stayed a beat longer in conversations when everyone else moved on. And one night, when I couldn't sleep, he found me sitting by the vending machines and told me about his hometown like it was a secret. Now I was in that town, apparently. He poured hot water into a chipped mug and slid it toward me, still hot chocolate. Still perfect. "So," he said, leaning against the barn's support beam, "what are you really doing out here, city boy?" I smiled at the old nickname. Road trip. Supposed to be a soul-searching thing. Got detoured by Mother Nature and a terrible GPS. He whistled. "Sounds like the universe is trying to tell you something. Or screw with me. Same thing some days." We talked for a while, our conversation slipping easily into the same rhythm we'd had back then. It was strange how quickly it came back. The teasing. The quiet understanding underneath the jokes. I kept catching myself watching him when he looked away, at the way his fingers curled loosely around the mug, or how his mouth tilted slightly before he smiled, like he didn't want to give the whole thing away. "You can crash in the loft," he said eventually, jerking his head toward the ladder leading up to a makeshift second floor. "It's mostly hay, but I've got some spare blankets." "Thanks," I said, then paused, realizing something. I left my sleeping bag in the car. And the road's basically a river right now. Caleb scratched the back of his neck. "I've only got one out here. Guess we're sharing unless you want to freeze your ass off." There was a beat of silence. Not awkward exactly, but heavy with implication. "I can take the floor," I offered too quickly. He raised an eyebrow. "You're the guest. I'd be a pretty crap host if I let you do that." "Right. Then I guess we're sharing." I tried to say it casually, like it didn't send every nerve in my body firing at once. He nodded, slow and unreadable. "Guess we are." As we climbed the ladder later, I couldn't stop noticing the little things, the way his shoulder brushed mine when we turned too close, the echo of his voice in the quiet loft, the way his flannel shirt still clung to my skin. When we lay down, the space between us felt at once too small and too vast. I kept my hands tucked in close, hyper-aware of every breath, every shift of weight. And when our arms accidentally touched, he didn't pull away. Neither did I. Sometime around midnight, the storm hit harder. I was half awake, tangled in a blanket that smelled faintly of wood smoke, and something I didn't want to admit reminded me of Caleb. Thunder cracked overhead, the kind that rolls through your chest and makes the walls hum. Wind rattled the barn doors. Somewhere below us, a horse snorted nervously in its stall. Caleb stirred beside me. "You awake?" he murmured. His voice was low, almost hoarse from sleep. I could feel the warmth of him just inches away. His back was turned, but I could see the rise and fall of his breath in the dim light slanting through the loft window. "Yeah," I said too quickly. "Can't sleep." He rolled over then, slow and drowsy, and the blanket shifted. Our knees brushed under the covers, and I forced myself not to flinch. It wasn't the first time we'd touched, not even that night, but it was the first time I didn't have the excuse of movement or accident to hide behind. I told myself it didn't mean anything. Just two people trying to stay warm in a drafty barn. But then his foot brushed mine again, deliberate this time, and stayed there. "Storm's getting worse," he said quietly. "Yeah. Looks like you're stuck here tomorrow too." I swallowed. "Guess I'll have to make the best of it." He smiled at that, just a flicker, half-lidded and lazy. "With me? Tragic." There was that teasing again. It was always harmless, playful, like we both knew it didn't go anywhere. Except, it never quite felt that simple to me. I turned to face the ceiling, staring up at the exposed beams. The wind howled. Rain pinged off the tin roof like static, like something trying to get in. My heart was a mess. Every brush of his knee sent a flicker of heat through my chest. I wanted to move closer. I wanted to roll over and look at him properly, to ask him what this was, if it was anything. But I couldn't. I couldn't risk shattering the fragile comfort between us. Because if I was wrong, if he didn't feel it too, I'd lose him again. And this time it would hurt. "I always wondered," Caleb said suddenly, breaking the silence, "why you stopped texting me after orientation." I blinked. That one caught me off guard. "You noticed that?" He laughed, soft and dry. "Of course I noticed. You were the only guy I met that week who didn't pretend to be someone else. I didn't think you'd remember me." I remembered everything. The words landed somewhere between my ribs and my throat, sharp and unsteady. I turned to look at him, finally letting myself really look. His face was relaxed in the dark, but his eyes, God, his eyes were clear and focused in there. "Why didn't you reach out?" I asked before I could stop myself. He hesitated. "I almost did. A couple times. But I figured, if you didn't want to talk, I shouldn't push it." "I wanted to," I said. My voice was too soft, but it was the truth. "I just didn't know what I wanted from you." And there it was. The edge of something neither of us had dared to name. He didn't respond right away. Just stared at me like he was turning something over in his mind. "Do you still not know?" he asked eventually. I couldn't answer. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. Instead, I dropped my gaze, and that was when I felt it. His hand, warm and certain, sliding over mine under the blanket. Just a touch. Just there. I looked back up. He didn't pull away. The silence stretched between us, charged, full of unsaid things. I could feel the heat of him, the closeness, the way his fingers curled slightly like they were waiting for me to meet them halfway. And I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But the fear, the old, familiar fear, coiled tight in my chest. What if I was reading it all wrong? What if this was still just Caleb being kind? What if I leaned in and... "You're thinking too hard again," he said quietly, a half-smile tugging at his mouth. I stared. "You don't know that. I've always known that. You overthink everything. It's kind of your thing." His thumb brushed across the back of my hand. Just once. Barely there. But it lit every nerve in my arm. "I'm not trying to mess with you," he added. "If that's what you're afraid of." "I'm not afraid," I lied. He tilted his head slightly, studying me. "Then what are you waiting for?" That question hung between us like another crack of thunder, quiet but impossible to ignore. And the truth was, I wasn't waiting for the storm to pass. I was waiting for a sign that it was safe to stop running. He gave my hand a gentle squeeze. Not forceful. Not demanding. Just there, like an invitation I could accept or walk away from. I didn't walk away. I turned my hand, slowly letting my fingers lace with his. And in that moment, with the storm raging around us and the warmth of him pressed close, I stopped pretending I didn't want more. I stopped pretending I didn't want him. The barn creaked around us. Outside, the storm hadn't let up, but I could barely hear it anymore over the pounding of my own heart. Caleb's hand in mine felt too steady compared to the way I was falling apart inside. We didn't say anything for a long time. Just lay there, the air between us growing denser with each passing second. I felt his thumb trace slow circles over the back of my hand, casual, like he wasn't rewriting the gravity of the universe with every motion. I didn't know how to speak without shaking, so I didn't. Eventually, Caleb broke the silence. "You always looked like you had something to say back then," he said, voice soft. "But never did. I used to watch you bite your lip like you were trying to keep it in." I swallowed. I didn't think I was allowed to say it. He turned slightly, propping his head up on his hand. "Allowed?" "Yeah." I stared at the wooden beams again, anywhere but him. I didn't want to mess it up. You are, this confident, steady person." I was a mess. I didn't even know who I was yet, let alone what I wanted from you. It just felt easier to let it go than risk it. "Is that what you did?" he asked. "Let it go." I hesitated. My fingers tightened slightly in his. "No. I just buried it. Pretended I didn't stay up late thinking about that stupid vending machine conversation or the way you laughed when I called campus coffee hot dirt. I thought it would fade. And did it?" I shook my head. I think I stopped trying to make sense of it, but the feeling never really left. It just waited. I finally turned to look at him, meeting his gaze head-on. "I didn't expect to see you again. Definitely not like this. But now that I'm here, I don't know how to go back to pretending." There. It was out. My voice cracked slightly near the end, but I didn't try to hide it. I couldn't. Caleb didn't speak for a moment. He just studied me, quiet and unreadable. Then he let out a breath, slow and shaking. "I kept thinking about you too," he said. "Way more than I should have. After orientation, I'd scroll through my phone and wonder if texting you would be weird. If you'd moved on or thought I was just messing around that whole week. You always looked like you were walking on eggshells, and I didn't want to be another crack under your foot." I stared at him, stunned. "Why didn't you say anything?" He laughed quietly, without humor. "Because I was a coward too, apparently. I thought maybe you were straight. Or just confused. Or maybe I'd imagined the way you looked at me that night by the vending machines." "I wasn't imagining it," I whispered. Our hands were still clasped between us, but now they felt like an anchor. My heart was thudding so hard I thought he might hear it through the mattress. He shifted closer, just a few inches. Just enough for me to feel his breath ghosting over my cheek. His voice dropped lower. "Then tell me what you were thinking. Right now. No pretending." I closed my eyes for a second, gathering courage like I was reaching into a fire. "I was thinking that if I kiss you," I said, "I won't be able to act like this is temporary. That if you kiss me back, this we becomes real. And real things break sometimes." There was a long pause. I felt him watching me like he could see every crack in my armor. Then he said quietly, "Not everything breaks." I opened my eyes. He was right there. Close enough that I could see the faint freckles across the bridge of his nose, the way his eyes softened when they looked at me like I wasn't just a passing crush or a leftover memory. "You sure about that?" I asked. "I'm not sure about a lot," he admitted. "But I'm sure I've wanted this for a long time. And I'm done pretending I don't." He reached up then, slowly, giving me every chance to stop him. His hand hovered near my face, hesitating, waiting. I leaned into it, just enough to let him know I wasn't going anywhere. His fingers brushed my cheek, gentle and grounding. My breath hitched, and the moment held, stretching thin with anticipation and everything unsaid. Then he kissed me. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't explosive. It was careful, like he was trying to memorize the shape of my mouth and the weight of my yes. His lips were soft and steady, and I kissed him back like I'd been waiting my whole life to get it right this time. When we finally pulled apart, we didn't move far. His forehead rested against mine, our breaths mingling in the space between us. "Well," he murmured, "guess we're not just sharing a sleeping bag anymore." I laughed, a quiet, disbelieving kind of laugh that felt like exhaling years of bottled-up feelings. "I guess not." We lay back down, facing each other this time, still close but no longer afraid of it. His fingers traced patterns over the back of my hand. I felt his leg brush mine again, but now there was no confusion. No excuses. Just warmth. Just us. Caleb tucked a strand of my hair behind my ear and said, "You know this complicates everything, right?" "Yeah," I said. "But I'm okay with complicated." He smiled, eyes heavy with emotion. "Me too." We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. We stayed curled around each other, listening to the storm fade into a softer rhythm. At some point, I drifted off, still tangled in him and that kiss and the way his thumb hadn't stopped moving over my skin. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. I felt wanted. I felt home. I woke to sunlight pouring through the cracks in the barn roof, warm and gold and quiet. The storm was gone, and in its place was the smell of damp hay and morning earth. I felt the weight of an arm across my waist, grounding me. Gulp. His breath was steady against the back of my neck. One leg had somehow hooked around mine during the night, and I was absurdly aware of every single point where we touched. I didn't move. Not yet. I wanted to stay like this a little longer, suspended in this fragile, perfect calm. Because something had shifted last night, not just between us but inside me. All the noise I'd carried for years, the doubt, the guilt, the fear, it had quieted. At least for now. "You're awake," Caleb mumbled, his voice low and gravelly from sleep. "Barely." He stretched, his arm tightening around me for a second before releasing. I was worried it was a dream. "You kiss all your dreams?" "Only the ones with smart mouths and sad eyes." I let out a laugh and turned to face him. His hair was a mess, flattened on one side, and his flannel shirt from last night was bunched up around his waist. He looked like he belonged in the morning. Like he was the morning. "This feels weird," I admitted. "Weird bad or weird good?" "Weird good," I said quickly. "Just new. Like the ground still settling." He nodded, watching me carefully. "I get that. I mean 24 hours ago I thought you'd forgotten about me. 24 hours ago, you looked like a wet raccoon. Charming." He grinned. "I have a type." The teasing settled something in my chest. It was still somehow, playful and sharp and full of the kind of affection that didn't need to be dressed up in big words. I reached out and brushed a piece of hay from his shirt. "So, what now?" Caleb grew more serious. "Well, for starters we get out of this barn. I'll take you back to the house, shower, breakfast, all that." "And after that?" He hesitated, but only for a second. "After that, we figure it out. I'm not expecting you to drop your life or stay in the middle of nowhere. But I'm not letting you vanish again either. I don't want to vanish." "Good," he said softer now. "Because I want this to be something." My throat tightened. "Me too. I'm not perfect," he added, voice lower now. "I've got this whole messy life here, early mornings, muddy boots, unpredictable cows. But I kept thinking about you all these years for a reason. And I'm not walking away from it now." Something in me cracked open at that, not the painful kind of break but the kind that lets light in. "I don't know what comes next," I said. "But I don't want this to be just a weekend thing. I want, whatever this is, us, to have a chance." Caleb leaned in then and kissed me again. It was slower than last night, more certain. Less about electricity, more about promise. When we pulled apart, he whispered, "One condition." I raised an eyebrow. "Condition?" "You have to stop pretending you don't like country life. You talk a lot of crap, but you slept like a baby in that hay. I had a human furnace pressed against me all night." He smirked. "And you're welcome." I rolled my eyes, but my grin gave me away. "Fine. One condition for you too." "Hit me." "You have to stop wearing plaid," ironically. "It's starting to feel intentional." "Oh, it's deeply intentional," he said, already sitting up and reaching for his boots. "Get used to it, city boy." As we gathered our things and prepared to leave the barn, something settled in my chest, less of a final click and more like the first page turning. It wasn't the end of anything. It was the start. Later that afternoon, after the barn was behind us and the storm had dried into memory, Caleb took me on a walk through the backfields behind his house. The land stretched wide and golden in every direction, thick with summer haze and the low hum of cicadas. He led the way along a worn path between the fence line and a wild patch of sunflowers, hands in his pockets, boots crunching softly in the grass. I walked beside him, still in the borrowed flannel from the night before. I hadn't meant to keep it on, but he hadn't asked for it back, and some quiet part of me hoped he wouldn't. "You sure you don't mind me hanging around a little longer?" I asked, nudging his arm with mine. Caleb looked over at me, lips twitching like he was fighting a smile. "Mind? You think I offer up half my sleeping bag to just anyone?" I gave him a look. "I don't know your life. Maybe that's standard hospitality around here." He stopped walking and turned to face me, sun catching in his hair, turning it the color of ripe wheat. "You're not just hanging around, okay?" he said. "I know this is new. And messy. And maybe a little fast. But I meant it last night. I want this to be something real." "It is real," I said. "I wouldn't be here if it wasn't." Something shifted in his expression then, softened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. When he handed it to me, I opened it and laughed under my breath. It was a crudely drawn map. Stick figures. A little barn. A big red X where I'd apparently parked yesterday. A smiley face near the loft. And in the corner, a sentence scribbled in Caleb's messy, all-caps handwriting. You're here. Stay as long as you want. I looked up, my throat tightening again. I know you don't need a map, he said, suddenly a little sheepish. But I wanted you to have something. In case you forget where to find me. I didn't say anything for a moment. Just folded the paper carefully and tucked it into my back pocket, heart full in a way I hadn't expected. You're such a sap, I said quietly. Only for you, he replied, grinning. I stepped closer, took his hand in mine. This time there was no hesitation. No pretending it didn't mean something. His fingers laced with mine like they'd always belonged there. We kept walking. As we crested the hill behind his house, the farmhouse came into view, old and whitewashed, a little crooked, like it had been weathered by time but never broken. It reminded me of Caleb in a way. Steady. Worn in. Still standing. He glanced sideways at me. So, what do we call this? You and me? I thought about it. About labels and timelines and how the world liked things to fit in neat boxes. But then I looked at him, at the warmth in his eyes, the way our joined hands swung gently between us, easy and light, and I realized it didn't matter what we called it. It's a start, I said. And that's enough for me. He leaned over and kissed my temple, just a quick, sure press of his lips. It felt like a promise. When we reached the porch, he paused at the steps and turned to me again. You staying the night? He asked, trying to sound casual. Only if I get my own sleeping bag this time. He smirked. No promises. And with that, we stepped inside, not just into his house but into something real and uncertain and good. Whatever came next, we'd figure it out together. Because sometimes the storm doesn't wreck you. Sometimes it brings you home.